Did you know that human food is extremely bad for your animal, and if you give them even a scratch of anything that is not kibble, they will die? Welcome back to Myth Busting Monday. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Skylar. I'm a certified dog trainer and pet nutritionist, and this is Myth Busting Monday, where we take common myths and misconceptions about dog training, behavior, and nutrition, and find the facts and the truth behind these myths so that you can better make decisions for your pets. Today we're taking a deep dive into whether or not human foods truly is bad for our animals as we think. Chances are your vet or your dog trainer has recommended that your animals don't get food from your plate, they don't eat human food, they only eat the food that they've recommended. Whatever the case may be, getting creative in the kitchen is not an option for your animals. Now, this is one that has both a lot of truth to it, but also a lot more flexibility than it's been painted to be. Typically, no human food is seen as a very black and white issue, where you have people that absolutely would never give their animal anything but kibble or canned food. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who tend to only give their pets leftover food from their plates and hope for the best. The reality is that somewhere in between is actually the healthiest option for your pets. Now, as with any nutrition advice, I always recommend that you speak to a veterinarian because every pet's an individual and there's some health conditions where adding a lot of variety to your pet's food could potentially cause more harm than good if it's not done correctly. So this is definitely generalized advice, and you should proceed with caution. That being said, that especially if you're feeding a kibble diet or majority of a kibble diet, adding additional foods, especially meats and moistures, to your pet's food is going to be much healthier for them in the long run. Kibble especially is lacking in a couple of things that are really important to the overall health of our cats and dogs, and that's meat. Both animals need a high meat content in their foods, and that meat is even better if it's in a cooked or raw form that makes it more digestible. Yes, there are some kibble options that are high in protein, but not all of that protein comes from an animal source. They can come from peas and legumes or other plant-based sources of protein, and kibble's just not that digestible in the grand scheme of things. They're much better off getting those sources of protein from more realistic sources. Additionally, moisture is drastically lacking from kibble diets, and this causes a lot of strain to the digestive tract as well as other organs. A big part of the reason why cats especially are so prone to kidney disease is a fun mix between not being natural water seekers, so the majority of their moisture content they tend to get from their food, and kibble not having much moisture to it. So having a wet food or bone broths or goat's milk or additional meat supplementation is really important to making sure that they're staying well hydrated. And if you're sitting there watching this video, like, trust me, my animals get plenty of moisture, that's not a problem for us. Generally, the recommendation for dogs and cats as a minimum is that they get 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight. And that can add up quick. So what people foods can you add to your pet's diet, and which ones should you continue to avoid like the plague? Generally, a good rule of thumb is carbohydrates, not really needed. They are not considered an essential part of your dog or cat's diet. Not only are these often harder for our animals to digest, they're unnecessary. They also tend to have other ingredients like sugars that are not going to be great for our pets. So things like breads, crackers, cakes, cookies, most things that you find in your cupboard, we probably want to avoid. Meats, on the other hand, are a great option when you're wanting to add a little something extra to your pet's food. If you're feeding human-grade meats, like the meats from the grocery store or a butcher shop, I highly recommend you lightly cook them before you feed them to your pets. Just because, as much as I love feeding raw here on this channel, and you can find tons of videos about raw feeding, raw pet food and raw human food have different criterias that have been put forward by the FDA. If you go to a pet store and get a raw pet food that's intended to be not cooked when you feed it to your pets, it's required to have 0% pathogens like E. coli, Listeria, and Salmonella. It has to meet the same rigorous safety standards as kibble or canned food. Human meat, on the other hand, since it's intended to be cooked before you eat it, like most of us do for ourselves, the FDA says that they can have up to 4% of those pathogens. So it's safer in the long run to lightly cook these foods to help get rid of any pathogens before feeding it to your animals. Generally, in my kitchen, if I'm shredding some chicken for tacos or I'm browning some beef for chili, I'm gonna set a little bit of that aside before I season the food to add a little bit extra to my pet's food or to use in something like a Kong or a Westpaw topple when I'm making enrichment toys. If you're going to be giving your pet meats like this, you want to make sure they're unseasoned. Just plain is totally fine and they'll be happy as it is. Adding a bunch of seasonings adds too many variables to your toppers. You can introduce things like too much salt, harmful herbs or spices, or just unnecessary ingredients. So just plain is perfect. Additionally, there are a lot of fruits and vegetables that are pet safe. Things like carrots, cucumbers, squash, apples, banana. But there are some of these ingredients that you want to take extra care with. Things like broccoli, you want to only feed the florets at the very top, and ideally you want to steam those ahead of time. Broccoli can be harder to digest and break down, and so steaming them or lightly cooking these kinds of ingredients helps to kind of pre-digest the food and make it easier on your pet's body and prevent gas. There are also a lot of fruits that you can give as treats every once in a while. Things like blueberries or apples or bananas. Generally with fruits, they are more of a treat and should be used less commonly. And with any new food, there's always a potential for digestive upset. So that's something to just be aware of. My personal favorite human foods turned dog foods include meats, unsweetened applesauce, plain Greek yogurt on occasion, especially when you're doing an enrichment toy. Pumpkin puree is an absolute favorite. Goat's milk is a great one that I recommend often, and so is bone broth. A lot of those ingredients, I have specific videos talking about the benefits of those things that you can check here on the channel, and I'll also include a playlist up above for you to check out. As much as there are safe and beneficial foods to give your pets, there's also a very long list of harmful foods. Things like chocolate, sugars, grapes come to mind immediately. I'm going to leave a couple different resources down in the description box below that include a list of harmful ingredients as well as some ingredients that are pet safe. Again, if you have a pet with health conditions that may be impacted by what they're eating, always talk to a veterinarian and a knowledgeable nutrition specialist in order to come up with what foods are going to be safe and how to best introduce those to your pet. But as far as the blanket statement of human foods are extremely harmful to your pets, that's generally false. There's a lot of human foods that are a great benefit to your pet, and I think that it's very beneficial if we as a society stop creating this very thick line between dog food is kibble and real food is for people. Because there's a whole world of raw and cooked and even canned pet foods that are starting to blur those lines, and our pets are much better off for it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and if you learned something new, share it with someone else who could learn a thing or two. If you have any suggestions for myths or topics for Myth Busting Mondays, leave those down in the comments below. I would love to see them, and they may inspire a future video. Until then, I will see you in my next video. Bye!